Hi everyone, my name is Mackenzie Darling and I am here with Francoise Borzat, who will be talking to us today about psychedelic assisted therapy. Hello Francoise, how are you?
Hello Mackenzie, I'm well, thank you.
Wonderful. Francoise is the author of Consciousness Medicine, and I think the best way to get to know Francoise is, would you mind giving us a little bit of background of where you came to this work and what you're currently working on?
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Yes, I came to this work by coincidence, of course. I had moved to the United States from France in 81. And in about 85, 84, so I met some people who were working as counselors, psychotherapists essentially, and using as part of their practice some very therapeutic use of some various mind-expanding substances. And I became their clients and was very pleased with the result. I had suffered severe trauma, both in my childhood and later on in my early 20s, very severe trauma. And I was able to really come to term and really heal myself. So I found those very potent, and the efficacy was very much personal to me. And so I decided to become a student of these people. And that's the beginning of my story as a therapist and also as a psychedelic assisted psychotherapist. So I have been studying, of course, getting a master's degree and different training in the art of psychology, as well as immersing myself in the practices of psychedelics with indigenous people in Mexico, mostly, where this work is legal and accepted in the culture. And I have been traveling there a lot, bringing some people there, studying there, and experiencing the potency of those psychedelics, especially in my case, the psilocybin-containing mushrooms.
Wonderful. Thank you for that, Francoise. A big part of this conference that we're having is around suffering. And so I think it's really interesting to dive into the Western idea around suffering, and then also visiting the people within Mexico, the Mazatec tradition that the people that you work with. Can you talk about how we both view suffering and the causes of suffering?
Mm-hmm. Well, from a Western psychological perspective, suffering results in the non-addressed issues of our childhood, generally traumatic or situational or cultural, that have been oppressing us or wounding us and that are not really addressed. So then they transform into a suffering that is carried into our adult life and can really cripple our ability to establish loving relationships, productive life as citizens and as a member of society, in terms of work we're doing, the capacity to be, good parents to our children. So suffering is really an unresolved burden from the past. So that's how we see it in the Western world, I think. There's all kinds of different orientation, including Buddhist orientation, right? So, well, what is suffering? What is the human condition associated with suffering? The Mazatec tradition of the indigenous people of Mexico doing this work with sacred mushrooms, they say that suffering is a disconnection from the world of spirit. So they consider in the more shamanic angle, the relationship with the land and the relationship with the spirits and the ancestors and more the invisible forces of the universe, a great grounding force for us human beings and a great centering. And that if we are fueled by this spirit and by this visceral connection with the land, we are then strong enough to support our human suffering and also to heal our human suffering through the power of spiritual awareness.
Wonderful. And so your book, Consciousness Medicine, it talks about the bridge between those two, the Western psychology and the indigenous wisdom. Can you talk a little bit about that? And, also the work with the Center for Consciousness Medicine, teaching guides on how to become psychedelic assisted therapists and why it's so important to bridge those two modalities together.
Yes, as I was traveling to Mexico and really immersing myself in that culture, and then being a therapist, a counselor in California, I was realizing that there was a gap. There was a difference of orientation, obviously, as we mentioned earlier. And my goal or intention, or maybe ambition, was to create a bridge between these two cultures and to find a way to translate this ancient way of looking at life and at healing and at spirit in a way that would be easy for the Western, more industrialized world to relate to. So I looked at how we are experiencing human life, and I created the holistic model, which is a model based on 5 aspects of life: the body, mind, spirit, environment, and community, that are infused with quality of wisdom, creativity, and love. And this model is a kind of a roadmap for looking at our way we experience life and the way we can also heal and grow and balance. So it's really the holistic model for balanced life. So I think that the goal of all of our life is to have a balanced life. It's not to be perfect life, but to be balanced. And so the book is an attempt to, and it's been well received, to create this roadmap for people to understand who they are, to also have a practice of ongoingly to support their life, and to also prepare for when they go into a meditation retreat or ritual, expanded sense of consciousness with whatever techniques they use, not necessarily with psychoactive substances, although people certainly in the field of psychedelics have found this book really useful to create a better understanding of the preparation phase, the actual experience itself, and also the integration phase. So the goal is to create a bridge between these two traditions, and to my teacher used to call me the interpreter. So that was a big job description, but I tried to take it at heart and create a vocabulary, a narrative for what I feel these shamanic practices are really potent and efficient for us, more modern civilization. I mean, it's not like they not have modern life for sure, but like a different angle of understanding modern life. And the Center for Consciousness Medicine was born out of this desire to actually broadcast this knowledge through retreats that we are certainly guiding in location where this work can happen, of course, with sacred mushrooms, and also with the training of psychedelic assisted guide who could then be equipped and educated and skilled and safe and to be able to assist people in the process of giving a mind-altering substance and support them in the process of healing. So we've developed some training formats and some schooling so people can really find a solid and reputable education in the field.
And can you talk to our audience a little bit about why it's so important to train guides and to have that holistic container, and also having them walk through like what that curriculum looks like for a guide, and why it's so important for guides to also be doing their own work along the way. I think that's really important.
Yes. Well, I think that being a guide is a very complex proposition. One has to be aware of the space itself within oneself. So there's a practical experiential that is needed. And then there's a lot of psychological education that needs to take place as well. There are lots of areas of obvious emerging experiences that take place during those journeys, such as trauma, such as addictive patterns such as unresolved family issues, or sometimes transgenerational issues with people whose parents or grandparents or even further back have been, tormented or oppressed or victim of genocides. So there's a lot of baggage we carry. And so a guide has to be really well trained psychologically to be able to, support some other people. So yeah, the experiential aspect is really massive, I think. I think that it's really important to understand the territory, have a good education, and have a great sense of care and compassion and willingness to be of service to others.
Wonderful. And what are you most excited about with the future of psychedelic assisted therapy? And what do you think are probably the greatest benefits that people could receive from it?
I'm excited because psychedelics have been existing for thousands of years on the planet and have been practiced by indigenous people very respectfully and very sacredly and very powerfully, right? The healing have been very potent, and the healing and the sacredness of the connection with the divine. So I believe that this is a return to what has existed for many centuries, and that we learn from indigenous people how they've done this. And the current psychedelic field is a very sort of a booming, it's like the gold rush, it's like the Wild West. Companies are popping up everywhere for research and compound making and commodifying a lot of these psychedelics. It's a really fascinating and booming field. And so I think that the exciting future is that a lot of people who are deeply suffering, as we know, from depression, from anxiety, from addiction, from grief, are going to be able to receive help in ways that very little has been really working. Psychiatric medication hasn't improved for the last 40, 50 years. The therapeutic field is, very beautiful, and I'm the first one to speak of that, but also limited in its reach into people's psyche. So we need to go deeper. And those medicines are, in fact, doing a great job at helping people. So I think that this is a practical and pragmatic approach as well, that we have access to ancient traditions that are worth being reactualized in our society. And I'm looking forward to all kinds of field, the field of research, the field of, ceremonies and legalization and decriminalization. I prefer the legalization in the sense that it provides for a bit of a better context of delivery of those experiences and more safety in my eyes.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. And can you talk to people who may not have, experience within psychedelics, especially psychedelic-assisted therapy? Can you talk about how psychedelic-assisted therapy and talk therapy are different, and like the benefits of that?
Mm-hmm. So talk therapy is very beneficial in terms of getting a space to talk about oneself, and to, through the talking and the reflection from the therapist, an invitation to look deeper into some aspect of their life, people get to really articulate very well what they have probably never said before. So it is very beneficial, and I love being in therapy, in a verbal therapy as well. So it's not an either or. I think that the benefit of psychedelics is that it goes deeper into the psyche. It goes into touching some layers that are really what we call part of the unconscious, right? It's like dreams. We go into those very deep states where experiences can emerge, and in a way, move out of our inside, so to speak, and be extracted and be moved through and liberated. So it's a more efficient way to work on oneself. It's, people say that one experience, a good, guided, well, safe experience with psychedelic is equivalent to about a year of therapy. And so I think that's true. In my experience as a recipient as well as a practitioner, I agree with that. I agree that there is a great acceleration and a great deepening of the process with psychedelic. Again, it has to be done very safe, very diligently with a trained guide, so the process itself can make sense and can be safe and well supported.
And what would you recommend? I know that most of your experience comes with psilocybin. So if someone were looking, to heal something within themselves, like would this be psilocybin or MDMA? Like, do you have suggestions around what these different medicines have within their capabilities to heal?
Mm-hmm. So the research that the MAPS has been doing, the Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Study, MAPS has been doing very important and important study with great results on the treatment of PTSD with MDMA, which is bearing a lot of fruit, and in a couple of years, I think, will become legal, and that will be a treatment form that will be available to people, veterans, and people who've had accidents, rape victims, like people who really, well, a lot of us deserve this kind of approach to address some very deep-seated trauma. So MDMA is a really reputable medicine for this treatment. And in a couple of years, the retreat center and the clinics will be available to people. And that's the preferable access to trauma work. Trauma work can also be accessed with psilocybin, in a sense that, in a lower dose where people are not completely diving into the subconscious, psilocybin mushrooms can be applicable to trauma treatment as well. And then, looking at one's life, opening a spiritual dimension, looking at the, old unconscious and deep-seated patterns is more accessible with psychedelic mushrooms. Looking at one's family of origin and the origin of the family of origin is really reachable in psilocybin work, because it dives deeper into the unconscious layers, which MDMA does not really dive into as much, since the ego structure is more intact during that experience.
Wonderful. That is very, very helpful. Thank you, Francoise. We only have about a minute or two left, but I want to leave the audience with ways that people can work or, get connected with you.
Yes. So you can go on my website, and I have various talks that I've done. I have my book for sale. I have also some online courses, which have turned out to be really useful for people. I get great feedbacks as I guide people in through various states of consciousness with different techniques that are doable at home, in the safety of your home. And they're really help you start touching different zones of your inner world and reach a better health. So I invite you to look at that. Thank you.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Francoise. It has been an honor chatting with you. And thank you for being part of World Happiness Fest.
Thank you so much for having me.